Yeah, range of dimensions of sustainable development. And essentially when we're bringing forward proposals for development, we have to have regard to all of these elements and really looking at what opportunities are there through a new development to meet the needs of the achievement of sustainable development and all of these different factors of that. So moving on to Dorset, and just to give you a few slides here, really, just to show a bit of an understanding of the Dorset context and how that informs plan making and the council's process that it will go on over the coming months into the end of this year, where it will prepare a new local plan. So this plan on screen, so the colours probably aren't brilliant, I'll point them out a little bit. So this darker green, for those that can see the colour, is the Dorset National Landscape, so the area of outstanding natural beauty. So you can see that that sweeps around a large portion of the county and sort of up towards the conurbation as well in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. The lighter green, for those that can see, is Greenbelt. So that is land around the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole conurbation that's within Dorset Council's administrative area, or some of it is. And essentially that Greenbelt land is to prevent the sprawl of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. Now there will probably be some development within that Greenbelt, but there will be a limit on how far that development can extend. So those are two particular constraints. The blue is, if you can see, the flood zones crudely shown across Dorset. So there are large areas of flood risk, generally focused along river corridors. So we're conscious, we've got the River Frome, which runs along the north of Upper Woodford site that I'll talk about in a bit more detail shortly. And then we've got, it's not a brilliant colour, but this brown colour is heritage constraints. And we've also got the environmental designations, so the special areas of protection, which relate to ecological value as well. So it's quite a multifaceted picture in Dorset in terms of the environmental constraints, very different to a lot of other counties that are probably less constrained. So, but what you can see hopefully on this plan is that there are sort of a few areas within the county where larger scale development could be provided. And you can see the more central area, the Upper Woodford site is shown in that purple icon, so the central area, and then you've got North Dorset as well, is generally less constrained in environmental terms. So just adding to that layer, it's also important to recognise public transport connectivity and opportunities to benefit from public transport within Dorset. This is a map of the rail corridors that are within the county. I'll use my cursor this time. Essentially, you've got a corridor going from Dorchester up towards Bristol, which is the blue line. You've got then a corridor going from, well, you've got connection to Weymouth as well, but essentially going from Dorchester into London Waterloo. So those are the two key rail corridors within Dorset. Again, different to other councils. Other councils will have more of a crisscross of rail corridors, but you can straight away see that North Dorset is generally void of rail connectivity. So that almost adds another layer onto the previous plan that we showed, sort of focusing in for the council's benefit on where it can focus development in terms of meeting those aims of sustainable development I discussed earlier. So the environmental aspect, active and sustainable travel as well. And clearly delivering the development would be an economic and housing benefit for the council and ultimately something that it has to meet. And then this is a more detailed plan, again, looking at the sort of sub-region that we've just been discussing. So from sort of Weymouth in the south up to Dorchester and then across to the conurbation. So you've got the black line as a rail corridor, shown going from Dorchester through to the conurbation, also going into Purbeck as well. What is notable, and it's probably not entirely clear on this plan, but we've got some dotted lines running along here. Essentially, that is a catchment area around that rail corridor, and essentially that is where 80% of the jobs within Dorset are currently located. So when we're looking at when the council is looking at locations for new homes, it needs to take into account how people would travel to those existing employment opportunities. And clearly along that rail corridor is where the majority are, and there are opportunities for sustainable travel to get people from their homes to their jobs as well. And then finally, just a more zoomed in image, really just in terms of where we are today. Obviously Dorchester, an indication as to where the Upper Woodford site is, so on land to the north of Crossways, and really just showing you where we sit in terms of Crossways, away from notably the Dorset National Landscape, which is the screen area to the south. So there is quite a significant separation between the Upper Woodford site and that designation in terms of understanding what harm there may or may not be. Okay, so in terms of our sort of work in terms of Upper Woodford, as I said, we act on behalf of a landowner who is promoting this land, and what I've included here is a paragraph from the National Planning Policy Framework in terms of what the government has suggested in terms of housing delivery. And it says the supply of large numbers of new homes can often be best achieved through planning for larger scale development, such as new settlements or significant extensions to existing villages or towns, provided that they are well located, designed and supported by the necessary infrastructure and facilities, including a genuine choice of transport modes. So for us, we've read that paragraph, we've understood that's been a government objective, not just from the Labour government, that was from the previous Conservative government who introduced this wording into the previous version of the National Planning Policy Framework. So I think what this shows is there's been a recognition for a number of years that actually to deliver large numbers of homes, as opposed to piecemeal, small-scale developments, the most effective way of doing that is by planning at a large scale. So planning for large-scale developments that include not just homes, and key in terms of those last few lines that I mentioned, in terms of the necessary infrastructure and facilities. So it's not just delivering homes without any doctor surgeries, without retail facilities, without schools. It's actually large-scale development has the ability to deliver all of that in one go, creating new sustainable communities. So that is a guiding principle from the government in terms of what the National Planning Policy Framework says. Dorset Council may be having regard to this in terms of formation of the new local plan. And obviously it's got a range of site options before it, one of which is Upper Woodford. But this will be one of the considerations that it will be taken into account in terms of meeting its housing requirements. And then just in terms of some specific factors around Upper Woodford and in terms of what the justification is from our perspective in terms of providing large-scale growth in this location. So I've included on this plan the train, that's Moreton Station. So that is located, and I'll show in more detail later on, to the southeast of the site. There is an opportunity through having that station in that location and having development nearby for people to be using that rail corridor, as I showed earlier, to connect to employment opportunities into Dorchester, into the conurbation. In terms of travel time, 7 minutes from Moreton Station into Dorchester. At the moment, there is only one train an hour, but it's a 7-minute journey. It's 28 minutes into Poole and it's 38 minutes into Bournemouth. So in terms of connectivity and getting people to existing employment opportunities and existing services and facilities, it's a good location for development, having regard to the policy I read out earlier. The other key consideration for the site, for those that don't know it, is currently being extracted for mineral, sand and gravel, and that extraction has been going on for the past sort of 15 years or so, I think. And there is an allocation in the Dorset Mineral Plant for future extraction as well. So ultimately, this isn't a clean greenfield site. It has been subject to quite intensive work over the last 15 years. And there's an opportunity as well through the mineral extraction to restore the land to a condition where you can deliver environmental benefits as well as that would feed into this new community. So it is an unscarred landscape, as I showed earlier. It's outside of the national landscape, so it never had any protection, but clearly the context of the mineral extraction is very relevant in terms of what it looks like now and how that could be impacted by development. So this is a plan, hopefully you can all see it, of the site. So
can you enlarge that? So
I will do what I...
the focus.
How's that? How's that? So for those, just to orientate, we've got the rail, no problem. So we've got the rail line running east to west, running through here. We've got Moreton Station in the south. What we've shown on this plan, these are the existing site conditions. So a series of constraints, as we term them in planning policy terms. So the beige areas, so you've got an area here, and an area here. These are the areas that will be subject to future mineral extraction. The extraction to date has taken place along what is a conveyor belt that we've shown on the plan. This has been extracted, this land in this western portion, and restored to agricultural land. So that has all taken place. These are the phases that will continue into the coming years in terms of mineral extraction. We've also got pylons running in a diagonal line through the middle of the site. So those are high voltage pylons that would need to be retained to a development proposal because ultimately they're incredibly difficult underground. So those would remain in situ. We've got public rights of way that currently run across the site. So they sort of come north-south from the railway line. There's a travelling one along here. We've got one through the centre of the site as well, and then one notably in the eastern portion of the site. So those are the existing public rights of way. Notable as a constraint is Woodford Castle. So Woodford Castle is a Grade 1 listed building, which is located, hopefully you can see my cursor, just to the west of Woodsford, the writing Woodsford on this sign. So that is a Grade 1 listed building, and planning policy seeks to protect and enhance the setting of heritage assets. What we have done, and it's a sort of a brown colour on this plan, is actually show how you could open up the setting of Woodford Castle. So at the minute it's quite contained by the existing country lane and some trees. Ultimately, you could open up that setting, have a wider tree belt running, and give it a grander sort of opening out as well. So there's an opportunity there from a heritage sense to deliver some benefit. And then the other point to flag is the River Frome, which runs into the northern portion of the site. So it's shown as a sort of what colour is that? Sort of yellowy green, if you like, on this plan. And around it, the blue areas are a flood zone. So those are designated by the Environment Agency. So those would be a constraint to development, but also the River Frome is probably an opportunity for this scheme. I talked earlier about wetlands and potentials of nutrient reduction from rivers. There is an opportunity due to the extent of land ownership here that through a development of the site, you could deliver those environmental benefits. That's something that we're sort of in discussion with the council about in terms of this. If it was to put the site forward and choose this site in terms of what a policy would require. So that's a bit of an overview of the existing condition. So if I move on then in terms of us trying to understand the site and understand the opportunities of the site. So as I indicated before, its location is the starting point in terms of how this can be a sustainable new community. Proximity to the train station, obviously proximity to the existing community of Crossways as well is an opportunity for this site, and it's an opportunity we see for the community of Crossways as well, which at the moment doesn't have a clear core, it doesn't have a clear centre, it may be lacking in facilities. Ultimately, a development at Upper Woodsford would generate a need itself for new facilities, but what this site could do is deliver a new centre located just north of the railway line. We've shown it very conceptually. I'll zoom in to the diagram for those back, hopefully to see. But essentially, a new core to the community that would service as a rural service centre. Obviously, the new community of Woodsford, or Upper Woodsford, the existing community, the small hamlet of Woodsford itself, and Crossways as well. So having a new well-connected centre that is well linked into the new community, into the existing community via a range of transport modes. We've talked about public transport and active travel before, which are the priorities in terms of sustainable development, but we're very also conscious of there will be car movements. You know, we're not going to stop car movements through a new scheme. There will be some, and this site provides a particular opportunity by its location in terms of level crossing closures. So at the moment, if you were to travel from the northeast of Crossways through to Dorchester, you'd have to cross a level crossing to the south of Moreton Station. You then have to travel through Crossways, out the other side of Crossways, and over another level crossing in the northwest of Crossways. This development could provide an opportunity for a through road from Moreton Station or from Moreton all the way through the site that would then connect out onto the West Stafford bypass to the west of Crossways, potentially allowing the closure of this level crossing. And then we would also potentially look at a bridge over the railway line here that would allow this level crossing to be closed as well. So from a rail safety point of view, there are good opportunities there as well. I've talked earlier about the train station and obviously the benefit of the location, but what we need to do through a new community is ensure that people are well connected to that train station, so that is an attractive option for travel rather than people deciding, we're just going to jump in the car because it's easier. So it's looking at pedestrian and cycle links to the station, to the site. I showed earlier there is an existing public right-of-way that runs from the station north into the Upper Woodsford site. There's an opportunity to upgrade that, to enhance that so it's a more attractive route, but also to have a mobility hub located sort of in general proximity of the station within the site, that you would have ultimately buses running around the new community and potentially the existing community of Crossways as well, transporting people to the station. So it makes things a lot easier for people to get from their doorstep to the train station into work as opposed to jumping in the car. So it's trying to enhance that appeal as well. Environmental opportunities, there are significant opportunities on this land. It is a massive site, really, in development terms. It wouldn't all be built on for residential. I'll show you later on where we've got to in terms of a concept. It wouldn't all be built on. There would be a number of environmental opportunities realised. There would be mitigation from a biodiversity point of view in terms of biodiversity net gain. There'd be mitigation to what's called suitable alternative natural green space, which is commonly known as SANG in development terms, where essentially providing an alternative walking location for the dog walkers, for for anybody out for a walk, as opposed to using the Dorset heathlands, which are under strain from recreational pressures, and the environmental value of those is coming under pressure. And I mentioned earlier as well the river frome and the opportunity that may present for this development in terms of nutrient enhancement that would benefit not just this location, but Dorset as a whole, and really it's Poole Harbour. That's where the impact is being realised at the moment in nutrient terms. So is there an opportunity through this site to potentially remove some of that nutrient from where it's coming upstream, from Dorchester, etc., from the river at this point that would reduce the amount of nutrient in Poole Harbour? So that's something that we're really thinking about. In terms of community, I've included some plans here as well. It's really looking at this comprehensively as a new community. It's not just looking at putting a few shops in. Are there any community growing projects, allotments, that sort of thing that would generate and cultivate a community in this location that would benefit, obviously, the Woodford new community, but also Crossways as well. As I said earlier, providing it with a real core and a real community centre. And just finally, very quickly, you can see on this plan green corridors as well going through the site. So again, it's not just focused on housing delivery, it's moving people through green corridors from the existing communities of Crossways and through the site as well. So it's an attractive environment. It's not just one large housing estate without any greenery. So it's trying to realise those opportunities as well through a concept for this site. So moving on to our vision. So this is where we are at the moment. So a sustainably connected new community led by landscape and integrated with the existing settlements, creating a legible and attractive new centre. Development will realise environmental priorities and improvements with green infrastructure laced throughout, encouraging sustainable and active lifestyles rooted in local Dorset character. So that's what we're looking at the moment. That's our vision, and that has informed where we are to date in the proposal that we have tabled to Dorset Council, which I will zoom in, is this plan here. So just to talk you through the various land uses. So the yellow land use and the beige land use would be residential development, along with the mix of pocket parks, etc. It wouldn't all be sort of concreted over. It would also have primary schools. We've talked about mobility hub, probably in this part of the site as well, but that would be the area generally for built form. So located in the southern part of the site with the best connections through to Morton Station. Also, obviously, the relationship with Crossways as well, and that existing community. And then what we've looked at in this central part of the site, as I showed earlier, is the central core of the new community. So the red or pinky area shown here, this would be a new high street and sort of with a range of community uses, retail uses that would benefit, the existing residents of Crossways, new residents of the site in sort of the most central location, not just looking at our site in isolation, but looking at the community at Crossways as well. And then the purple area shown here is a secondary school. We think that the development itself will generate a need for a secondary school, and that would obviously service the Crossways area and potentially wider areas as well. That's a discussion something for Dorset Council to understand if it was to allocate this site and require a secondary school to be delivered. Then moving on to wider land uses, we've got large areas of green infrastructure in the northern parts of the site. We've got areas of water, which are sort of where future mineral extraction would take place. I don't know if many of you are aware of Silver Lakes. We won't be proposing that sort of development, but it's that sort of environment of it not just being green infrastructure, but blue infrastructure as well, creating those attractive new areas for people to walk, and those would be the suitable alternative natural green space, so discouraging people from using the Dorset heathlands, which at the moment, as I said, are under recreational pressure. We've got Woodford Castle shown here. It's shown as a little church figure, or it looks like a church more than a castle. But you can see the setting of Woodford Castle would be opened up to this new parkland setting, which would be more reflective of its historical character as well. So we've considered that as part of the scheme. General green infrastructure corridors cutting through the site as well. Then we've got our connections to Morton Station, sort of coming through here, obviously along the road as well if needs be. And then the road network that I talked about earlier, so traversing the site east to west, allowing these level crossing closures and providing that connection through to Dorchester for those that need it. But ultimately, we do, the intention is to encourage those active and sustainable modes of travel, both through public transport, but actually what's on the site as well. So by delivering that, the new centre and that new core to the community is having those services, having those facilities that ultimately mean people hopefully are encouraged not to travel by car because they can access everything they need on their doorsteps. So that's where we are at the moment. Just to give a bit of context, we've shown icons in terms of what's happening at Crossways. So there's a site being developed here. That's under construction at the moment in Crossways. This site and these parcels are being talked about by the council, were mentioned as development options as well. So what a development Upper Woodford would need to do is have regard to the facility and retail needs of not just the existing community of Crossways, not just a new community of Woodford, but potentially an expanded Crossways as well, acting more as a rural service centre, serving that wider area. So I think that's it in terms of the Upper Woodford site. In terms of next steps, just to go back really to where we started in terms of the planning policy context. So Dorset Council is, as I said, in the process of preparing a new local plan. What that local plan will do is set out policies, it will set out site allocations to meet a housing requirement that the council is intending to try to meet, or we understand it's intended to try to meet, and is being required to meet by the government. So that process is ongoing. The council undertook what was called a Regulation 18 consultation August 2025, I can see there. So I understand, Joe, you responded to that as a civic society. There will be another consultation in the summer, or around about the summer, where they will consult on essentially the plan that they propose to submit to the government for examination. So that plan, everybody will have the opportunity to comment on that. Those comments will then be sent off to the examining inspector, appointed by the Secretary of State. The plan will then be submitted by the council. Their intentions are submitted at the end of this year, and that is a cut-off deadline set by the government for plans to progress under the current plan-making system. I won't get into too much detail about those changes this evening, but that's the timeline Dorset are on. Once that plan is submitted, it will then be examined by the Secretary of State. So there will be opportunities to make further submissions. There will then be hearing sessions where an inspector will chair a discussion with the council. There will be developers present. There will be members of the communities present as well. If that examination process is successful, the council will be then allowed to adopt this local plan. And essentially, as I said earlier, if it adopts a local plan, that sets the planning policy framework for decision-making on planning applications. So from our perspective with Upper Woodford, we've promoted the site to the local plan. It's been identified as an option within the Regulation 18 consultation. There's no firm commitment in that consultation. The council will be undertaking work over the coming months to refine those options and essentially choose its plan and draft its plan that will be consulted on over, well, it'd probably be, I'd imagine, late summer, early autumn by the time the council get round to it. So that's the process that we're on at the moment. If the site is within the plan, there would then need to be a planning application that would have a whole range of additional technical work to support it. That would need to go through a standard planning application process with the council. And ultimately, if that planning application was successful, it's then delivering the site. And really it's ensuring, from the landowner's point of view, it's delivering a really high quality development. So that's something that we're keen to do through this scheme. As I said earlier, there are big opportunities for development of this scale. But yeah, it's really seeing how things move through the planning process. And if we get to that point and delivery happens, then it's ensuring that's as good as it can be. I think that's me done. Thank you all.
Thanks very much. What we do, an opportunity for questions now. Just anyone online who'd like to ask any questions, please unmute yourselves, and then we have a speaker here. We should be able to hear you. But please, Joe, if you could, hold that microphone up for anybody who'd like to ask a question.
Yeah. Okay.
That means everyone.
I'll go flexi on it. Right. Okay. So we'll start in the room, and there's a hand going up at the back. I will take the first one. I'll just pass this to you. Second one is here.
Thank you. I've got three questions. One concerns. I'm sorry. You and Dorchester North have a similar problem in as far as the A35 is up to capacity.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that? Second question, might there be an argument for a new railway station rather than relying on Moreton, more central to the site? And the third question is, the landowner, if you like, and I don't say this in a cruel way, is taking two bites of the cherry if he gets his planning. So would we see, as so common with developers, an argument of non-viability? I somehow doubt it, so that we would be certain that social housing is provided to the capacity required by the local authority, and of course other facilities.
Great. Thank you for those. Shall I answer those?
Carry on.
So A35 capacity is a really good question. Essentially, from a local plan perspective, the council will need to model the impacts of all new development on the existing highway network. So it'll be factoring in not just this development, but it'll be factoring in all other development sites that it proposes to allocate. What they will then do is put that into a highways model. That will then churn out a result as to where upgrade work is needed. I have no idea what the answer to that question is right now. There's a process the council needs to go through. Obviously, we will input into that process through our proposal on this site. They will be aware of that. And then that would identify upgrade works needed to the network. But yeah, it is very likely there will need to be upgrades to a highway network to deliver the scale of development the council is looking at on a district or county-wide basis. So I think that's A35. In terms of the railway station, it's a good question. Again, we have asked this question of Network Rail a few years ago. At that time, they indicated they weren't interested in moving the station, and ultimately it's their decision whether they do or not. Whether the council engages with Network Rail to reopen that discussion, I don't know. I mean, speaking candidly, it's pretty clear there would be a benefit of moving the station, but there is still a good opportunity to link into where Moreton Station is now. So our focus is in connecting into where Moreton Station is now, unless the council and Network Rail tell us otherwise and that they would look to move the station. In terms of viability, I think the question was around affordable housing delivery and facilities. If I start with facilities, as I said earlier, to make it, I'll pull a plan up just so you see. To make a location like this work, to make a development like this work, it has to deliver the facilities. Secondary schools, healthcare facilities, local centres, retail facilities, those would have to come with a scheme like this for us to work. If those didn't come forward, it wouldn't get planning, is the starting point. And also, even if it did get planning, the market attractiveness of a location without facilities is not going to be there. So that would have to happen ultimately. Affordable housing delivery, we don't know what Dorset's policy is going to be in terms of percentage, but I would personally hope as a planning consultant, I'm not an expert on viability, that we would deliver the policy levels of affordable housing on a scheme like this. I think that my own personal view is that is really important now in terms of addressing the housing crisis. It's not just delivering, as I said earlier, the number of homes, but it's the right type of homes as well. But the council will go through a viability exercise in terms of identifying what the right level of affordable housing should be for the county generally and for a scheme like this as well. Does that hopefully answer those questions?
Interesting.
You said about sustainable development. I didn't hear, I don't think I heard you say about sustainable energy.
Yeah.
Would you say something more about that?
Yes, I can. Sorry, that was one that wasn't on my slide. So yeah, absolutely. Sustainable design. I mean, I've personally got a bit of a view on sustainable design in that building regulations are now enforcing increased requirements in terms of the fabric quality of new homes and on photovoltaic panels, air source heat pumps, etc. So those, in terms of the design of homes, are being regulated through building regulations. They also sort of filter into the planning system. So absolutely, any new homes on this site would need to be designed to meet what is currently now future home standards. But by the time actually the site is delivered, there will probably be an enhanced version again in terms of sustainable measures on construction. So those homes would need to meet those standards. In terms of sort of more general renewable energy, turbines, big sort of solar panel fields, solar farms, I think those would be, the council would need to factor in what is the right location for those. We don't think this site, given the need to deliver residential development, the need to focus on new community, the other environmental opportunities we've got here is the right location for those. The council may decide otherwise and may decide that they'd like to see a solar farm on a large part of the site. It's not something that we're putting forward, but the council will need to have regard to energy generation and renewable energy moving forward as part of that sustainable development requirement set by the government.
David was first off the blocks there.
Well, how long do you think it would take to build the whole site?
A number of years. We're talking with a site like this. We're talking about, just if I talk about the sort of shorter term timescales, and then I can leave it. So the planning process, the local plan process, will take at least another 2 years, at very best case scenario. So the council will produce a plan, it'll go to examination. That will take a period. The council will maybe have to do modifications. So that's talking about at least 2 years. Planning application for a site of this scale in itself will probably take 3 years, I would imagine. You would then need to get detailed approval for various parts of the site, so that the housing design, the exact layouts of each development parcel. So you're looking at another couple of years, even for the early phases of development. In terms of the overall site, what we have indicated to the council is that, so I didn't give a number earlier, but the total capacity as we're showing now is 4,000 homes. What we are indicating phasing wise is that 1,500 homes could be delivered within the council's plan period, which is up to 2042, I think, and then beyond that, the remainder would be delivered. And the reason for the phasing particularly is the mineral extraction. So the mineral extraction is going to take place before residential development is constructed. So the western and southern portions of the site are generally quite clear. So the southern portion hasn't had any mineral extracted. The western portion has been extracted and completed. And then it's this eastern area and the northeastern area that's subject to future extraction. So realistically, the completion would be in the 2050s, I would anticipate. Finger in the air, it may even be longer. This isn't a short-term project. This would be a very long-term development project built out in phases. I think the key from a phasing point of view is the upfront delivery of infrastructure and facilities. I think, again, as I said earlier, to make a place like this successful is having those facilities in place early. So those don't come, as I indicated, these would come in the first phase of development as opposed to the second phase, the new local centre and the secondary schools. So that for us is something that we see as being important. But the overall lifetime of the project, until it's completed, I would say there's another 30 years, which sounds very long.
That's a very good idea. Boundary.
Yeah.
Boundary, I think, was started in 95 or something like that. And it's still, it's going to take another 2 years or so to finish.
Yeah.
And I think they were building at a rate of 150 or 130 houses a year, which allows the whole place to develop slowly rather than a great influx.
Yeah, it does. I think again, the communities early on allowing that housing to then, the market attractiveness of those homes as well. It's not just creating homes that aren't going to be lived in, it's homes that people will want to invest and live in. So yeah, I think hopefully that's useful in terms of that programme.
I don't know how to use that.
Just keep it near you.
All right, I'll give you that.
Hold it 6 inches from
Yeah, I think you've answered my one question, which is I didn't know how many houses were proposed. You've just said 4,000. And does anybody know how many houses there are in Poundbury? Would there be? Does anybody know Poundbury?
I was going to say it's in the thousands. It's in 2,500 sounds. I was going to say 3,000.
Well, I think that Poundbury is there's a danger that Poundbury is overtaking the original Dorchester town. So 4,000 is enormous amount of houses there for their local inhabitants and everything. And to be honest, nobody gives up their car. They're all driving. So anyway, so I just think it's too many houses. Am I right? It is all of that yellowy, beigey stuff.
Yes, correct. So it is a large number of homes. And as I said earlier, really, in terms of the government's objectives on sustainable development, it's developments of this scale that are really able to deliver the infrastructure. I think if you're talking about 500 homes, 600 homes, it doesn't really bring with it that much infrastructure. It'll bring with it maybe a primary school, but it wouldn't bring with it a secondary school. It wouldn't bring with it a new high street. It wouldn't bring with it new doctor surgeries. So the benefit of delivering at this scale is the ability to concentrate and deliver those infrastructure needs. I do recognise it is a large number of homes. I think in terms of the existing community, we hope actually would be seen as a benefit, because I think at the moment Crossways, as I said, lacks a sort of a real core centre. It probably lacks some facilities. Hopefully this would help in terms of delivering a real centre, a real community, and all these green environmental benefits as well. That's sort of the proposition that we're putting forward, but I recognise the point.
Hello.
Hiya.
I just want to double clarify with what you said. You were saying about accessing the Moulton station from the south?
I'll tell you, I'll zoom in on this plan to hopefully. So
and then closing the other crossings.
Yes.
What do you mean? Do you mean the road?
Yeah, the road level crossing. So at the moment, there are 3 level crossings around Crossways.
Yes.
You've got one to the south of Morton Station. There wouldn't be anything we would do about that because essentially there's no land control for this landowner, and essentially that's a key connection in. The central crossing point here, which is at the end of Frome Valley Road as it goes over, the proposal that we've tabled to Dorset Council is that you could put a bridge over there. So that would allow the level crossing to be closed, with then a bridge going over the railway line instead. And we haven't had conversation with Network Rail. That's something for the council to engage with them on. So that's that position there. And then again, we haven't had a huge amount of discussion on this, but there is potential by having the road going through, you could potentially close the 3rd level crossing at the west of Crossways. And that would essentially mean that traffic would travel. And there's not a huge amount. There are a few houses. I don't know if you live in one of these homes, but there are some.
I do.
You do. I mean, it's not something we've concrete put on the table. It's something I know Network Rail are keen to close level crossings.
I was just wondering, how do I get out?
Yeah, but so the way in which again, these are very preliminary thoughts, but you would come. Hopefully, you can see my cursor on this.
Yeah.
You would come back down the road. You would then go up Frome Valley Road over the bridge, and then out this way. Now, I do appreciate it would be a little bit of a longer way around. And it may not be the right thing at all. The Hywel Authority will make a call on whether that's right or not. I think what we've presented it to the council as is it's an opportunity, noting Network Rail's agendas. But it may be that the Hywel Authority decide, for reasons as you've just explained, that there are some properties who would be particularly inconvenienced. And it's quite useful to speak to you tonight, actually, to understand that point. So, yeah, hopefully that's useful.
I actually live in Upper Woodsford.
Okay.
And the building on the opposite side of the road at the moment is under pylons, which is where all the 4,000 down to Woodsford are going to be built. Now, years ago, I was on a parish council in a village. It was an old buildings, but they had pylons, and people began to get cancer, and it was thought that it was connected. And if you look up on the internet, it says that it's suggested that buildings aren't within 1,500 meters of pylons, which are 500 meters apart approximately. I'm on the edge of that. So the buildings at present in the field opposite are all within the pylon.
So just to understand the buildings you've talked about, the existing buildings, are these the ones just north of the railway line, the employment buildings?
Yeah.
Yes. So the pylon line, just to show, obviously I showed on a plan earlier, but broadly on this concept drawing, what we've done is preserve this green corridor under which the pylons would run. So they wouldn't run over new homes. That's not the proposal. And there would be a sufficient buffer and offset in line with requirements in terms of the energy companies to ensure that that buffer is preserved between new homes and the pylons. But it's definitely something that we need to take into account with the development of this site.
I did write years ago at the time when it was suggested.
Yeah, I think they definitely do cut across the site. I think it's the way in which we develop the site to have regard to that constraint. And it's certainly something that we'll need to think about.
So it goes across the school?
So I think, so this would be the school site at the moment. So the school buildings would be down here. Ultimately, you'd have playing fields above. Now, generally, the policy is you can have open spaces below pylons or around pylons. Again, this would need to be designed having regard to those pylons about where exactly you put the land uses. But this is just a crude indication as to where broadly those would be. And yeah, we have given some consideration at this stage to pylons.
2 questions. One, are you presenting this to the local parish council? And when? If not, why not? And the second question is, Crossway is already earmarked, is already having 140 built on it.
Yeah.
We've been earmarked for another 150 that's gone through planning somehow before Christmas. And we've got another 500 being built on Warnwell Road. At this rate, we will be a mini Dorchester with no transport links. I can't justify why we need another 4,000 built behind us.
So in terms of the process we're going through, obviously we are making submissions to the officers at council level. We haven't engaged politically at all at any level. It's for the council really. We don't know what the council's decision is on this site. If the council was to choose this site, it would then need to present it to the parish council because it would be the council's selection as opposed to ours. So it's probably a little bit premature for us to meet with the parish council. At some stage, I'm sure we can do that meeting with the parish council. I think what we would want to portray is those opportunities for the existing residents of Crossways as well. And then in terms of the growth at Crossways, those are following along the council's decisions on housing allocation. So they have allocated a couple of sites in the existing local plan that is now nearly 10 years old, haven't quite come forward yet. And then there are other sites that are options within, there are sites which are options within this emerging local plan, which may be selected as well, that could be developed. And I think there is, being truthful, there is the chance this would be a real focus for as a location for growth to the local plan. In terms of the 4,000 houses, it is separated by the railway line, but the benefit, I think, is, again, this provision of a real centre that hopefully would actually enhance the area. I do appreciate people see housing delivery as a negative, and I do appreciate construction is going to take some time. But really, it's just trying to do what we can to benefit not just the existing or the future community, it's the existing community as well. So we will certainly be having regard to
that. We've got a question online from Jane Ashdown. Can you hear us, Jane?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. James. Very interesting presentation. You didn't mention any particular developer that you're working with. That's my first quick question. And then partly related to the previous questioner's comments, I'm involved in a campaign opposing the north of Dorchester development, but it is very much part of the local plan. I mean, is this centre that is being designed to keep people sort of out of Dorchester? If we've got 4,000 houses, 10,000 residents in Dorchester, and then a few miles away another similar development, how is a planning consultancy like yours kind of thinking about how all this is going to work together? Or maybe that's not your brief. I don't know. Thank you.
If I can just repeat the question, because you may not have been able to hear. Jane was asking, number one, are there any particular developers that are lined up as part of a consortium or as a part of the overall plans? And secondly, a question, I think, around the relative strengths or merits of this versus north of Dorchester. Forgive me, Jane, could you paraphrase that again, please?
Well, it's more about the, we're talking, if there's 4,000 at Upper Woodsford, 4,000 houses, about 10,000 people, another 10,000 north of Dorchester. I'm just wondering how planning consultants companies think about, the larger development context. 900 homes at Charminster planned. We're going to be this weird kind of new town strung along the Froome.
Yeah. Okay. So I think generally the question is, how does this plan fit into the context of looking at things a little bit more holistically and zoomed out maybe one level in relation to other planned developments?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the first question, Jane. So there is no developer on board. So we are promoting this directly on behalf of the landowner. So there is no developer at this stage. There would be at a future stage in the process, but there isn't at the moment. In terms of the overall strategy for Dorset, that is the benefit really of this happening and the local plan happening, because it allows everything to be considered comprehensively. I think I answered a previous question in terms of the highway impacts. That can all be assessed on a comprehensive basis. That would take into account all of the developments proposed across the county, not just within the sub-regions, but also, again, noting an earlier question around Crossways and the development, it would factor in the impact of all that development at Crossways on the highway network. It would look at education comprehensively. It would look at GP surgeries, general facilities, public transport opportunities. So that's the benefit really of this all coming through the plan making process, as opposed to developers putting in speculative planning applications where it's only looked at on a piecemeal basis. So it actually allows proper thought to be had, and it's for the council to go through that process. In terms of our ambitions for Upper Woodsford, it is for a predominantly self-contained new community, but we recognise people will still need to travel principally for employment. I think there would be some employment offer at Upper Woodsford, but not necessarily on the same extent as somewhere like Dorchester or certainly the conurbation. So for us, it's understanding when people do need to travel for work is how they can do that most sustainably. But we'd hope From an education perspective, certainly the day-to-day community needs, those could be met through Upper Woodford and service the wider, the Crossways area really as a rural service centre.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Joe.
very much. Thank you.
I think one more question. This man here was first, so you can pick up the questions afterwards with Hywel.
No problem.
Right.
Specifically.
Employment, you haven't mentioned that, and Dorchester is running out of jobs because of the jobs being taken over by AI, etc. So where are the people going to work? Do you think about that? You haven't mentioned it.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the opportunity, we've indicated on an earlier slide where the majority of Dorset's jobs are, and they are along that rail corridor. So we're looking at Dorchester through to the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole conurbation. So that would be our expectation, is that people would travel generally in those areas for jobs. This site itself, we haven't necessarily proposed employment. The council may decide that through its own needs assessment that this site needs to accommodate employment. What we have indicated to the council is sort of flexible employment spaces, which are becoming very popular for employment investors, could be provided as part of the town centre. So it wouldn't be a standalone employment park on the edge that doesn't relate to the new community, that actually any jobs that are provided as part of the scheme or employment is part of this sort of core of the community. That's what we've proposed, albeit at a smaller scale. The council may decide that they need more. In terms of AI, I can't really answer that question in terms of how that's going to affect jobs moving forward. But our expectation, and Dorset will be looking to plan for more employment. There is existing employment, and we would look to tie into that.
Thank you for that. Ian, you've got a question online. You're on mute at the moment. If you could come off mute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, just about, Ian. If you just, I'll repeat the question for the audience.
Right, okay. My question is in two parts. The first one is, are you hoping to get garden community status? And
so the first question is, are you hoping to get garden community status?
And my second question is, what impact are you going to be having on heritage and landscape? You've touched upon Woodford Castle, but you've not mentioned Morton with its church, the burial spot for T. Lawrence, and Morton House, which is very important in Dorset's history because of its connection with the Tolpuddle martyrs. In relation to Woodford Castle...
So let me just summarise, Ian. Ian's asking about have you considered the heritage impact on particular local assets such as the church in Morton? I think you mentioned something about Woodford Castle as well already. Please go on, Ian.
Yeah, so there's the Woodford Castle. You say that's going to be screened by trees. In relation to Morton, there's the church, which is very important, particularly for the stained glass, for the engraved glass. Morton House, which has an important part in the history of Dorset, because that's where James Frampton lived, and the burial spot of T.E. Lawrence. Are they going to be affected, or do they lie out of the zone?
So the question is about Morton Church, the burial spot for T. Lawrence, and Morton House in particular.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Thanks, Ian. So if I start with the first question, which is about garden community status. So no, we wouldn't be putting the site forward, or the council more appropriately wouldn't be putting the site forward, because I think the government's aspirations now around new towns are for larger scale development. So they're looking at 10,000 plus. So we would actually be way below the threshold that the government would be looking for. But in terms of garden communities and garden village principles, we will be looking, as I said earlier, sustainable development now is orientated around a number of those. So those are historical sort of planning movement from the 1930s, I think. So we would have regard to some of those principles, but we wouldn't be applying for formal status from the government as a garden community because we're not big enough, essentially. In terms of heritage impacts, as Ian, you said, we've sort of had regard to the closest assets and the ones most affected by the development, or could be, and sort of sought to design the scheme appropriately. In terms of wider assets, we haven't had a look at those yet. The council should be doing so as part of its review of the site. And yeah, it's really useful, the ones you've mentioned to me today, so we can probably do our own work on those as well to understand what the relationship is. It may be that they are screened and separated. There is quite a dense woodland belt at the edge of Moreton. But it's really useful to get that, and we'll have a look at those.
Right, I think probably it's worth closing up now. And then, like I say, people can take up issues with Hywel afterwards on a one-to-one basis, at least for a while, until closing time. Thank you very much, Hywel, for coming along and being open about what you're proposing and responding to the questions. People will still have concerns, no doubt, which will be ongoing. But it's been a useful exercise in trying to understand what's been proposed and us thinking about relationships on a strategic basis as well. So thanks very much. Cheers.
No problem. Thank you. That's it.
Yep. Angie's going to say something.
No, just letting people know online we're closing the meeting. So thank you very much for attending, and see you at the next one.